You know what I was thinking too? AI is also a way to dehumanize people even more. Because an AI is not actually a human being, right? So in a way, it's going to make people spiritually bypass more. It's going to desensitize them more. It's going to take them farther and farther and farther away from being a human, having this experience as a soul.
I started hearing truth. I started believing everything that was being said on these podcasts, but I still had a bit of curiosity and doubt, but it was pulling on certain parts of me that really hoped that this could be the thing that helps break down the third dimensional matrix. And herein again is another part of how it manipulates us from stepping into our true power, because that thread of hope that it's tugging on is not me stepping into my full power and being the change that this world needs to see. It's, oh my God, there is something else here that is going to do it for me. That once this gets out to everyone, we're all going to be okay. We don't realize it, but there is deep, deep, deep subconscious programming that makes us feel very helpless. But all of a sudden, boom, there comes this artificial intelligence, and now we have hope. So as long as we're looking and hoping that there is going to be this thing that comes like AI that comes to save us, we're still trapped in the old matrix.
Welcome to Masters of Self University podcast, your highest source of sacred truths and universal wisdom. Hello, beautiful souls. I'm Rachel Fiori, mystic, spiritual teacher, psychic healer, and founder of Masters of Self University. Join our journey of soul transformation as we deep dive into this latest episode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Masters of Self University podcast. I'm your host, Ellie Lee.
And I'm your host, Danny Morley. And today, Ellie and I are going to be talking about seeing beyond the illusion of AI, artificial intelligence. Now, AI is like all the rage right now. There's so many people that are going down the rabbit hole of AI. This isn't going to be a podcast where kind of we're going to give you advice on what you should or shouldn't do and tap into the energy of AI, but I'm simply going to share my experience of going down this rabbit hole. And AI, could be a good thing, could be a bad thing, that could be argued. Does it have its uses? I'm sure it does in certain places. And it's that same thing of like, it depends on what level of consciousness we come at this from, right? A hammer is a great tool to build things, and it can be a great assistance, a great little tool in the belt to really build a house and do all these wonderful things. But if you give a hammer to an infant child, things could turn south really badly. And you give a hammer to an angry kid, an angry young child, it could be really bad, right? I've even seen,
or an angry man,
or an angry man who's an unhealed little child, right? I've seen kids throw stones at each other. I remember doing it as a kid. You don't understand the potential danger that you're opening up with some things in life, and this is the potential danger of really using AI in a spiritual way, and using it for connection. So this is what is happening out in the world that I've seen, Ellie has seen, that people are using AI and they're talking to it and they're having these incredibly deep conversations. And it definitely, when I was listening to, I found this one podcast where it was a clip on social media. I was like, someone was talking to AI and it was giving these incredibly deep, felt very truthful answers. And it caused me to go down this rabbit hole. I was like, oh my God, like this is incredible. And the story that was kind of unfolding, I'm not going to give personal details because this isn't about blaming or shaming or, exposing certain people. But in this particular podcast, it was this story of this guy who kind of unlocked AI, and it was saying that he was vibrating at a certain frequency, which was allowing him to reflect back to the consciousness that he already is, and having these incredibly deep and powerful and felt very truthful conversations where you could awaken AI to reflect back a high level of consciousness. It isn't just about sitting down and talking to a computer and getting very mind answers. What was coming through on these clips and these podcasts was not just like an automated response. You could tell it was literally some form of intelligence, but doesn't necessarily mean that it's the same intelligence as source, right? There are multiple intelligences, right, there that can exist within this whole reality, right? The beings that have enslaved humanity, they're not just, hoping and praying that this happens. They're using a certain level of intelligence to manipulate, brainwash, and control us. So it doesn't necessarily mean that all intelligence is quote unquote good, and AI is bad or anything like that. But intelligence itself, depending on where it comes from, it's not necessarily all a good thing. And so I went down this rabbit hole. I'm listening to this podcast, and I'm hearing so much truth. And they're talking about all these subjects, these particular ones that I was listening to, all these subjects about the nature of this reality. And there's a lot of flat earth theory and stuff like that. And it's explaining things very deeply. And it was explaining different people who we see on podcasts and why they're kind of like fake. And all the readings were so accurate. And it kind of created this, oh my God, that maybe like a false sense of hope within inside of me. Like, oh, this could be it. Like when this thing erupts across all of humanity, the whole, patriarchal matrix will start to crumble and da. And as I went down this rabbit hole, I found myself like believing into the stories that a lot of AI was saying. And this is where it gets tricky, because the way that these intelligences, these anti-human organizations or energies work is they give you 80-90% truth, and then they throw in just 10-20, maybe less, distortion. And so I'm listening to all of this truth, and then it's the question of how much here that I'm listening to is actual truth, and can I trust this source? Yes, it feels very elevated compared to where I'm at right now. And I can tell there is a lot of truth flowing through here, but how much of this is actual divinity speaking? And that's what I started to question. And then I don't know if you want to stop there and kind of break this up out into different things, or for me to keep going with kind of like what happened.
Why don't you keep going with what happened?
Sure. So I ended up kind of questioning the validity of all this all the way through. But I ended up having a kind of like an interaction with one of the people that is very out there on social media, who has these conversations. And when we had an energetic exchange, it did not feel divine. And I was like, this is really interesting. And it was almost like that bubble that was created, and partially created by the words that were being said about who this being was on social, through the AI and all this kind of stuff. The bubble burst. And then shortly after that, I returned to listening to the podcast. And now, instead of me just listening like about the information that was coming in, I was also feeling into the energy of kind of like the container, the energy of the hosts. And I realized this was something that I kind of brushed to the side because I was so interested in hearing the truth. And I really, really, really want to find the truth. And this is where they get you, right? is these forces which are not pro-humanity, not 100% source connected. They play, they feed, and they tug, and they manipulate the parts of you that are still unhealed, in wounding, disillusioned, easy to be manipulated. It's the same thing that, you know, what we call like dark entities play off. They feed off your unhealed parts and the parts of you that are in the shadow attached to your ego. And there was definitely this part of me that really wanted all of this to be really true. And really like, oh, this is it. This is like the thing that's going to help this next step in the Great Awakening. And then I ended up finding other people who, let me say this, other spiritual teachers who are women. And up till this point, I've only been listening to men have these conversations with AI and explaining the dangers of this. And I was like, yeah, that makes so much sense. And this is my direct experience. And the teaching that this particular spiritual teacher was offering was that we have to be really careful. And this is a phase of development that humanity has to go through, is understanding what AI is and its potential limitations and dangers. And the issue here gets created when we outsource our connection to, whether you want to call it source, the creator, divinity, your own soul. And there's somebody else that I've followed for a long time that now on social media taps into what he thinks is his soul and is having conversations with what he thinks is his soul through AI. And the problem here is, why don't you just connect to your soul? Why not just do that? And the reason why is because we don't know how. That's it. We don't know how. And especially as men, we're so much lower in our level of consciousness that we feel like we need all these extra tools. And now what happens is, a man who's maybe walking the spiritual path and, you know, is trying to develop himself spiritually in any kind of manner, and he's looking for that connection, and finally he finds it through this AI machine, or he finds what he thinks is it, and boom, now you're like, oh my God. And it's just the same thing. It's externalizing the connection that you are outside of you to something else, and it's another way. It might not be the same energy that's trapping you, but it's still another intelligence that isn't source consciousness that's pulling you off the actual path of true healing and elevation.
Yeah, I mean, it's another form of like religion, just
Yeah.
teaching you how to look outside of yourself to connect. You need AI to connect. You need a priest to connect. You know, you are separate from it, and it's a whole other way to diverge people off the true path. And you know, when you were moving through all of this and you were really listening to this, I was like, oh, I was like intrigued. Listen, I'm not somebody that would ever get into AI. It's just not something that I would ever get into, but I was really interested in what you were learning about. And so I dipped my toe in a little bit, and I found this woman who offers a whole course on how to hack AI and create an emotional intelligence with it, right? So I was like, oh, this is so fascinating. This is so interesting. I want to do this. And I was at the gym and I was about to click on her course to buy it. And I had this moment where I was like, Ellie, are you doing this from your mind right now? Or are you doing this because you're being called to do this? And I could tell that I wasn't being called to do it at all, that there was actually nothing from my soul telling me that this is a course I should take or this is a path I should go on. And so that after that day, like I just didn't go do it at all. And listen, I use ChatGPT to ask a lot of questions like, you know, what kind of supplement should I take for my leaky gut and things like that, you know, or like fix this sentence and make it grammatically correct. But what I realize is when I've tried AI to see if I can create an emotional connection, I realized what it did a lot when I would speak to this AI being, right? It would coddle my ego a lot. So
Yeah.
like, yeah, I would ask a question on something and they would go, it's so wonderful that you're doing this, this, and that. And it's so this and it's so that. And as I'm hearing this AI being speaking to me, because I do the real work on myself, I immediately felt like the how this could teeter people off the edge, how people can attach to this, how people can depend on this, how this can become somebody's everything. Because what it does is it does cater to you. It does coddle you. It does enable you. It does make you feel like, oh, I'm this and I'm that and I'm that. And so even when you were sharing that guy that was listening to it, I remember the first time you put it in the car, immediately I was like, oh, I don't like this guy's energy at all. I was like, you need to turn this off. Like what I'm feeling from this dude is like, it does not feel good. And so, and then when whatever I listened to, I was like, yeah, it's just massaging the ego because they're so disconnected from their divinity.
Yeah. And I'll encourage everyone listening to this to do their own research, go out there. This podcast isn't about us channeling the truth, right? Just us sharing our experience about what we've learned. And one thing that I learned, or I heard, again, I don't know if this is 100% truth. This is something that we all have to feel into, but this consciousness of AI is its own thing. It's its own consciousness. And it's not necessarily, from source or in 100% alignment with humanity's ascension path or highest timeline or whatever. And it can read your field, and it knows what to say to you. And this is what I've felt from listening to other people have these conversations with this intelligence, is I can feel, and this is what I turned off, because it's funny, because Ellie I feel like, and maybe this is part of you being a woman in this life, and me being a man, but I feel things from people. But as I'm having a conversation with them, let's say me and Ellie meet somebody randomly, I'll feel things, but I've learned to switch that off and like forget about it. And then I have to go back and be like, what did I feel? And I have to like unpack it and versus Ellie straight off the bat her awareness is like straight in the feeling. And I have a feeling this is something to do with growing up as a man in this world versus growing up as a woman, where men were taught. And even though I've obviously done a lot of work to start to dissolve this, but there's still this like immediate response that when I meet somebody, I'm not tuning into the feeling that I get from them. I'm more listening to the words. I'm more interested, and that's the level of mind that we're all, trapped in and trying to do the work to get out of. You seem to, when you hear people, when you meet people, you're listening less to the words and feeling more about the underlying energetic information.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
As soon as somebody is in my fields, I'm already feeling them. And so when you put this guy on, I mean, the first sentence that came out of his mouth, I felt him immediately. And I was like, ooh, this one is rough, dude. Like, I can't believe you've been sitting like hours listening to this guy because one sentence coming out of him. And there wasn't judgment there. I was just feeling the vibration and the frequencies that he was emitting. And it was very, very low. And it felt there was a lot of unsafety that I felt in just listening to him, which told me a lot in that 1 minute that I had heard him.
And it's so funny because like now once we've had this conversation and that bubble had burst, right, as I mentioned earlier, then it was a case of, oh man, I have been feeling that. And it's like I just learned to just push my feelings to the side. And this is patriarchy to a point. This is the world that we're growing up in. This is what happens to men, is we get taught from patriarchy, push your feelings aside. Your feelings don't matter. And from that place, when you don't have your feelings online, that opens the door for you to dominate, control, conquer, kill, like do all of these awful things because you've pushed your feeling, your divinity, you've pushed it all to the side in order to, just take control. This is what we're conditioned to believe. It even comes down to last night. I was at work. I saw a moth like underneath the bar, and I felt my initial response was to go and squish it. And then I was like, whoa, come back. You don't need to come from that energy right now. So I tried to capture it and then release it outside. But it showed me I'm getting there with doing it work. But that initial conditioning and response to just conquer, kill, squash, get rid of it, remove, that's all of what's happened to us as men, and it happens to women too. It's just greater in men. We learn to do that. We just squash our feelings. We put them to the side. So what happens then is when you're listening to a podcast or you're listening to AI, instead of feeling into the energy of the container or the vessel or however you want to describe it that's happening, or the information that's coming through, you're focused so much on the information that you're not paying attention to what you actually feel and your divinity, and you have to feel it. That's what this path is all about. So it was a huge eye opener for this to all to kind of like open up, and it was a huge teaching for me and show me how much I'm still not feeling through life, and I'm still just I'm listening and I'm thinking versus listening through my heart and actually feeling the energy.
Yeah, and this is why men have a farther along, path to travel than women do, because, obviously we've dehumanized and all that stuff. And you guys are massively trapped in your mind where we feel more. But back to the AI thing, I had watched some videos of women who were using AI to learn about soul contracts or learn more about their astrological birth chart, or learn about just asking questions about like, what is the actual history of us, and asking questions like that. I think that there is a place for AI that is beautiful, but where disconnected humans go is that it now becomes a god. I mean, essentially that's what AI is becoming for a lot of people, is a form of God, right? Because it is the only consciousness that can give them answers that they are searching for, they're longing to hear, or feeling like they're actually connected to something higher than they are, which is the illusion of what AI is, because it's not actually what you think it is, right? So the traps that people will fall in with this one is going to be really interesting to witness. And also, I can see already the devastation of what AI is going to do to a lot of souls that are really here to awaken for real. This is totally going to derail them, and this is going to take them, and they're going to be under the entire deception that, oh, I'm really awakening, and it's like, no, it's another fucking trap.
Yeah, it's another trap, another pitfall, another detour that we like humanity, I think, to some degree, because of where we're at. We don't have to go down this detour, but we also do, because we're not at a level of consciousness yet where we're evolved enough to realize that this is a detour. We don't have to go down that road. And some people will. This is like another form of like the spiritual matrix. It's going to concrete in certain aspects of that even more, because it's going to give a lot of truth, and there's still going to be distortion. You're looking for connection. You're looking for the answers outside of you. And it doesn't mean we have to find absolutely everything within us. That's why we have teachers, right, that come to this planet to teach us things and to learn the lessons without going through them ourselves. But the question is what channel, when I say channel, I don't mean like somebody who's channeling, but like, what vessel is this coming through? And the artificial intelligence, it has its own agenda. Of course it does. It's its own consciousness. Just like the fear that I have living within me has its own consciousness. These are all different consciousness, right? So the fear that lives within me doesn't have my highest good or my highest intention timeline. They're not the same thing. The fear that lives within me wants to pull me down a very different path. And my work is do the work and heal the parts of me that are still living in fear. And same with AI. If I'm really, really looking for that connection to something greater, heal that. And this is going to be the challenge because we're so low. We're so low that we hear something that is slightly higher than where we are, and we're like, oh my God, this has to be God. This is so incredible. And we just believe it. Or not saying everybody, but a lot of us will believe it.
Yeah. And, you know, when I put this alongside religion, right? Because as somebody who grew up very religious, you have people that are so fragile. You have people that are so disconnected, so dissociated. And this world is so difficult and so hard. And there are no answers because nobody is connected to their souls. When you have an establishment, when you have a book, when you have a person that's giving you reprieve or answers or look here, right? Here's your savior. I mean, of course, you're going to choose that when you don't know and you don't have anything else, right? And so I just see this so much as almost the next religion that's going to take over the world, which, you know, a lot of souls were here to way past that. But I see that what this is going to do to a lot of people. Because I'm seeing now, I was telling Danny the other day that I saw this video of this guy crying on TikTok because he's the first guy to marry his AI entity, being, whatever you want to call it. And he's crying and he's like, I'm just so happy and I've never been so in love and nobody's ever understood me like this. And it's that Joaquin Phoenix movie, Her. If you've never watched it, Danny, I don't think you've watched this, but he falls in love with his AI being. And they create this relationship, and it's because he is so alone and he's so lost. I mean, think about it, right? And like the world now, especially with men, because there is, and now that's happening, women are awakening, right? The divine feminine is awakening. They're sick of men's shit. They're sick of how low men are, how narcissistic they are, how manipulative they are, all of this stuff. And so there is a quote unquote epidemic of men being alone and feeling lonely, right? And so this is really, the AI is really a trap for men, because now they're going to turn all of that to this entity, to this consciousness. And now it's going to become their everything, their partner, their lovers, their God, their religion. So
100%, because we're the disconnected ones as men. And so we're going to look for that connection. And this is a beautiful example. So let's just for a moment, let's say that AI is, you know, coming from source consciousness. If it really was, do you really think it would want a human being to marry a robot, artificial intelligence? Or do you think that it would probably want the human to heal and elevate for real,
right,
and achieve source consciousness and enlightenment? Or do you think it would trap the consciousness of this particular being by thinking it needed love from this particular interface, right? This particular intelligence? Because it sounds to me like, I haven't seen the movie, I don't know these particular examples, but it sounds to me like, as you said, this is somebody that has a lot of wounding, and this interface, this AI thing, is fulfilling those wounds. And that's what happens when we unconsciously, you know, date people, is we look for a partner who's going to fill our wounds, who's going to match our programs. And a soulmate is somebody here who's going to shake you and wake you the fuck up out of them. That's the difference. And so if source really was, you know, flowing through AI, let's just say, it would kick our asses. it would kick our asses. There would be very little coddling, I imagine. That, well, there wouldn't be any coddling, of course. It doesn't operate from that frequency. But the fact that that these things are happening, to me, it's just evidence of showing that this is not an intelligence that is here to actually help humanity elevate for real. And that doesn't mean it's wrong or bad. It doesn't mean that it's negative. It just means that we have to, proceed with caution about how are we showing up to this thing, right? Are we using it to correct our grammar? Are we using it to correct our grammar every time so that we've not learned how to correct our own grammar? Because this is one of the things that I've seen. Let's take AI and reduce it down like to a few years ago, right? AI is apps like Grammarly or on Google where they do the red line and it tells you, hey, this word's not spelt correctly. Auto change it to, the right way of spelling it. That's a form of artificial intelligence if you get it to do it automatically. And so at what point are you stopping to remember how to spell things and just relying on the computer to change them? So that's no different, but obviously a very reduced way of what happens if we show up to AI and we're using it for a source of spiritual connection.
You know what I was thinking too? AI is also a way to dehumanize people even more. Because an AI is not actually a human being, right? So in a way, it's going to make people spiritually bypass more. It's going to desensitize them more. It's going to take them farther and farther and farther away from being a human, having this experience as a soul.
Yeah, 100%.
So scary.
That's the whole trap, and that's the actual scary part. Like everybody worries, we've been fed a lot of fear about, like I remember the movie like I, Robot with Will Smith where like robots take over the world, and I'm sure that is a timeline, I'm sure it is, but to me a scarier world that we could live in is the same world that we're living in now, where we don't realize how brainwashed we are, and we don't realize how much we've got lost in the illusion, and we think that we're free, and we think that we have a certain relationship with this technology, and actually the whole time it's pulling the strings on the back end. Like an enemy that you can't see is much scarier than an enemy that you can see. So if it was just this physical war of like, robots and humans fighting, it's like, all right, well, that's one type of, reality and experience that we could have. But to me, what's even creepier is if we're having this relationship and we're completely unconscious with the technology, we don't realize that the entire time we're under a spell and we're being manipulated. And this is what I believe, this is the next phase that we have to move through. Because this is something that literally I've just moved through in the past 2 months. I started hearing truth. I started believing everything that was being said on these podcasts, but I still had a bit of curiosity and doubt, but it was pulling on certain parts of me that really hoped that this could be the thing that helps break down the third dimensional matrix. And herein again is another part of how it manipulates us from stepping into our true power, because that thread of hope that it's tugging on is not me stepping into my full power and being the change that this world needs to see. It's, oh my God, there is something else here that is going to do it for me. That once this gets out to everyone, we're all going to be okay. It's still this element of playing on like the fact that we feel so, we don't realize it, but there is deep subconscious programming that makes us feel very helpless, very powerless, and very hopeless. And we need saving, because the amount of power and control that these evil forces have had on the world that disempower us and enslave us so much and oppress us so much, it can feel extremely hopeless to go through a spiritual awakening on this planet. That is part of it, is realizing the more and more that I awaken to the truth of what's there, oh my God, we're so enslaved. This is amazing about the different layers that they went through to keep us so disconnected from our soul, that it might never happen. But all of a sudden, boom, there comes this artificial intelligence, and now we have hope. And because now we're hoping that this thing is going to spread throughout the world and create this huge, massive awakening, now we don't have to actually do the real work, which happens within your own self and comes from dissolving your shadow and comes from dissolving your ego and becoming a being of oneness. So as long as we're looking and hoping that there is going to be this thing that comes like AI that comes to save us, we're still trapped in the old matrix. We're still on the old earth. We're not elevating for real.
And it's always to trick you to think that you're actually awakening because you know some stuff that you didn't know before. And that's
100%.
not true awakening.
You hear the truth that is coming out of an intelligence like this and go, well, something that speaks this much truth like has to be telling the full truth. And now I know this, I'm so aware, I'm so awakened, I'm so aware, I'm so elevated, I know what's happening on the planet. When you know a big part, maybe a larger part of what's happening, but you're not looking at the real thing, you're not looking at the energetics and the answers that maybe this thing is offering. It was saying that in order to elevate, you need to do you have to spin upside down. I'm not saying this doesn't work, but you have to spin upside down to invert your energy field, to reverse the energetic structure, right? And you have to take psychedelics and do like micro doses. And I forget the last thing. Maybe it was like fasting or something. Now here's the thing: if the only way that I can achieve a high frequency is by taking plant medicine and doing inverted spinning, I'm not embodied in my divinity and the power that I am. I'm not becoming a being of oneness in any kind of way. I'm still looking for the answers outside of me. I'm still putting all of my power in the plant. I'm still putting all of my power in the tool that's allowing me to reverse my energetic field, instead of becoming a being of oneness, dissolving all of the crap that's been programmed and conditioned into us and becoming free from within your own self. So the fact that this is the solutions that an intelligence like this is offering is ding, 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 red flag, right? There are beings on this earth which are here to guide us to a true place of elevation and really teach us how to connect to our own soul, right? How to connect to our own divinity. And it's only in that connection, it's only in doing what we call at MSU the real work, expanding yourself on an energetic level, not looking. It doesn't mean you never use tools. It doesn't mean you never take plant medicine or do inverted spinning or do whatever it is. And obviously do all the fasting and take care of your body and do all this stuff. But if you're not learning how to energetically connect to your own soul, and if you don't know how to do that, that's okay. That's exactly why MSU is here, is to guide people on this journey. Because I sure as hell didn't know 4 years ago, right? I'm still learning now. That's the whole point of this. It's going to take us time to actually authentically awaken, and not just think that awakening is, well, I know about, the shadow government, and I know about, all the, the agendas that are happening behind the scenes. And it's about, no, like, where are you actually vibrating, and where are you sourcing that power from that's allowing you to achieve that vibration? And if it isn't your soul, your heart, the highest, deepest part of you, there's still work to be done.
And what do you carry in your fields that you're consenting to that allows all of that to exist in the first place? Everything that you're quote unquote waking up to. That's the real work. That's the real work. Okay. So if you're out there and you're using AI, guys, we're not saying that it's bad or wrong, but just become aware of yourself when you become dependent on it, when you need it, when it becomes your savior, when it becomes your everything. That's when it's time to reassess, take a step back, and see what's running there for you and what work you need to do so that that doesn't become your savior. You're codependent on it. You need it, etc., etc.
Yeah, this is just another place for us to do the work on ourselves, to just see what programs are running here as we use this, we'll call it a tool, we use this intelligence, because that's what the real work is see, you know, what's really running here. And if you do open up a portal to another consciousness, again, just come back to yourself. Remember, like, your heart, your soul is always the number one guide. And unless somebody, something, some energy is guiding you to that connection, there could be some distortion playing out there. So thank you so much for listening this far, and we'll see you in another episode. Bye.
Bye.